got a story to tell?
What I'm going to try and do is go to schools and educate a lot of people about it.
Just because somebody's disabled doesn't mean they can't achieve something.
If you're aged 11 to 18, the BBC can help you tell your story.
I'm glad my friends and I have been able to make change.
Tell us your story idea. Enter now at bbc.co.uk/young reporter competition.
Discover unique stories.
If you work in human spaceflight, this is the worst possible thing that could ever happen.
Why do people behave the way they do online?
We're dealing with really nasty abuse.
This is the story told by the presidents and prime ministers who lived through it.
Volodymyr Zelensky, very philosophical, then very clever.
Only on the BBC. Watch on iPlayer, listen on Sounds.
This is BBC One, now Politics Northwest.
Good morning, it's Sunday, it's 10 o'clock. Welcome to Politics Northwest. This week, projects pushed down the road, plans to boost the local science sector, and a bit of green energy coming up. Mum's the word, but why didn't anyone tell these two why their preferred choice of school wasn't going to open?
I opened my offer. I got offered a school that wasn't one of my 5 choices and couldn't understand what had happened. I was like, had I done something wrong with my application?
And we'll look at separate reports on health inequality and the lack of compelling evidence of the government delivering levelling up.
We were expecting quite a lot of positive change in the town, and it's not really apparent today.
I think this needs a lot of renovation, and I don't think it's really happening, to be honest with you.
We'll also ask if the River Mersey can help power us towards net zero. Plenty of questions, and here to offer some answers for the next half an hour or so are Mike Prendergast, leader of the Conservative opposition on Sefton Council and parliamentary candidate for West Lancashire. And Nick Small is on the Labour cabinet at Liverpool City Council. But before we hear from them, let's get the week's main talking points with Steve Saul.
Blackpool has more preventable deaths than anywhere else in the country, and health inequality is worst in the north of England, according to a new report.
The UK is a wealthy country, but it's also quite an unfair country. Unemployment and economic activity are more concentrated in the north of England.
Meanwhile, there are no compelling examples of levelling up being delivered, according to a committee of MPs. Plans for the world's largest tidal power scheme on the banks of the Mersey have moved a step forward.
The Mersey Tidal project is ahead, and we could have something done which would transform the fortunes of our city region.
And Labour's deputy leader Angela Rayner was cleared after Conservative MP James Daly asked if she'd broken electoral rules over her registered address. Police said there was no evidence of wrongdoing.
OK, well, let's start talking about that tidal power, that tidal barrage possibly becoming real in Liverpool. How realistic is it, do you think, Nick?
Well, I think this is a huge opportunity. It was first mooted, I think, in 1924. Steve Rotherham, as Metro Mayor, has been, really campaigning on this since he's been in office since 2017. So I think this, this should happen. It can happen. But I think as a country, we've not been great at delivering some of these big infrastructure projects, and this government hasn't got a great record on that. You see that with high-speed rail as well.
So do you think it's realistic then? Because the government, according to Nick, doesn't deliver on these big projects.
Well, I think it's a really interesting project. I think it could be a massive infrastructure project, not just for Liverpool and the North West, but for the UK as a whole, really. And we've seen over the last couple of years about how energy prices have increased and have been impacted by international events, that having this kind of infrastructure in the UK could help with that. But I think the government does help with infrastructure projects. We've seen some of the funds that have been made available through levelling up and with the reallocation of HS2 funding, that funds are being made available for infrastructure projects.
Well, we're going to talk about levelling up in a little while, but this does come in the same week that the Prime Minister says we need to build more gas power stations. Is this an indication that there have been previous failures in investments in renewable energies?
No, I think we've seen over the last few years the growth in wind energy and solar energy. But the reality is that we're not going to be able to completely give up all hydrocarbon energy in a very quick manner, because we've got so much infrastructure dependent on it. And we can't put things in place which are going to end up costing people too much money. So we can't just completely switch off the taps for gas, for oil. We need these things within our energy mix and within our infrastructure setup.
Yeah, I mean, Nick, Labour has cut its green investment plans by half. Has it lost its enthusiasm?
No, not at all. I think we've got an opportunity here to make the Northwest renewable coast for Liverpool City region to really benefit from that. But I think we're right. We've got to look at how we get energy security, how we're not subject to international events, and we've got that energy security, but also how we use something like this to really drive forward a war on fuel poverty. A million homes could be powered by a Mersey tidal barrage, and this is the kind of thing we've got to be looking at.
One thing I just wanted to say is that Labour's plans to not issue any new licences for oil and gas exploration in the North Sea, I mean, that's going to have a big impact if they were to win the next election, because that's going to put our energy security at risk, I think. I think some of the decisions that we're taking as a government are helping improve our energy security, but Labour's proposals are going to put that at risk, I think.
But I think we've got to balance all of this. I think we've got to get the zero carbon agenda is really important. It's got to be about fuel poverty as well. But we've absolutely got to have energy security. And I think the tidal barrage on the Mersey will be a real opportunity to do that.
OK, well, we'll keep our eye on it, because, as you said, it's been a plan for a long time, hasn't it, since the 1920s? So hopefully this will actually happen now. So from tidal power to parent power, because the mums and dads of children who applied for a new school in Liverpool are demanding answers after being told it won't open by September and doesn't even have planning permission. The King's Leadership Academy was intended to alleviate the intense pressure on oversubscribed secondary schools. So what's gone wrong? A question for Claire Hamilton.
Competition for secondary school places in South Liverpool is intense. So Amira and Jennifer were delighted when their children were offered places at a brand new school in September.
First choice school, a good school, nice site, with some childhood friends.
Yeah. This week, they were told it won't open.
So can you both tell me why you picked King's Wavertree?
Because I'd heard that the Trust had a really fantastic track record, and I'd heard some really positive things about the head teacher. When I met him, I loved him, and I just thought he would be such a good role model for my son.
And come this week, you found out that King's Wavertree was not going to open at all. How did you feel?
At first, shocked, confused. We didn't know anything about any issue that had been going on in the background. I opened my offer. I got offered a school that wasn't one of my 5 choices and couldn't understand what had happened. I was like, had I done something wrong with my application?
This is the school site, an office building. Parents were expecting temporary classrooms from September until completion, but planning permission hasn't been granted and the Secretary of State won't sign off the funding. Yet the Department for Education are the applicant for the planning permission and the council is the body that can grant it. Both want the school open, but it won't. Confused? So are parents.
Politicians of all parties have raised questions about how this can have happened.
It is completely unacceptable to not have received a response on a matter of such urgency, and unacceptable for the department to have not raised any potential issues earlier.
The Department for Education says it continues to work closely with the local authority and trusts it to progress this project. While Liverpool City Council says we know that this will be disappointing to parents, carers and, most importantly, the young people who'd hoped to start in September.
But whatever it is, we should just get on with it. You've got a school ready to be inhabited by kids and they're arguing with each other. Let's just make this happen so those poor disappointed parents, those poor disappointed young people can have a school place.
Jennifer and Amira's children have been offered places at other schools. They say they were sold a dream which has been snatched away.
I just want someone to take ownership of it, to step forward.
I want it more than that. I want it rectifying.
Well, lots of answers, lots of people wanting answers there. So, Nick, I'm going to come to you first of all. What has gone wrong?
Well, it's a really disappointing situation that the parents and the children find themselves in. The issue here is around sort of the Department for Education, who's the applicant here. It's their project team that has this project, and the planning application did not go in until January of this year. It's a really, really disappointing position that people are in.
So let me just clarify this then. So the planning application would be approved by
Liverpool City Council.
Liverpool City Council. And why haven't you approved it?
Because this is in an area that is designated for employment use. It's an industrial area. It's Wavertree Technology Park, so it would require a change of use rezoning that area where it is in the local plan at the moment. That has to go through an independent planning process, a quasi-judicial planning process. But the City Council has been working with the Department for Education since 2022 on this, but the planning application did not go in until January of this year. It's the Department for Education that's been the bit that hasn't been joined up here.
I mean, the people being let down here are the parents and the pupils. Whose fault is this, and how can this be sorted out?
Nick will know more about this particular issue than me, but as it seems to me, it seems that if the planning application went in January, surely there's a possibility or a process where you can expedite these kind of applications to make sure that the planning application was granted so that the school could open. The whole point of this school being opened, as I understand it, is because there were lots of oversubscribed schools in the area. It's to relieve pressure on those schools. And right now you've got children and parents being let down because the school isn't open because of what sounds like a bureaucratic mess, really. So I don't really see why the planning application can't be expedited.
Why can't it be?
Because we have to go through a process on that. It's an independent process, and we've got to go through that process with the planning process. We can't shortcut that planning process. The bigger issue here is around how, over the last 14 years with this government, we've seen an increase in centralisation around schools policy at Whitehall. We've seen local councils cut out of the process. What we've been trying to do in Liverpool is build a family of schools. We work really closely with the other King's Leadership Academy, with lots of multi-academy trusts, and it's not joined up because of the way that schools policy has been centralised at Whitehall. This is an example of that.
Pick up on that. So this is an example of the government wanting too much control.
Well, no, I think it's the opposite, actually, because if schools want to academise and turn into an academy, it gives them much more independence, much more freedom to make decisions locally, which is suitable for them and for their pupils and for their area. But what I'd say more general is that education policy and education outcomes has been one of the big success stories over the last 14 years. We've shot up the league tables in terms of literacy and numeracy in comparison to our international competitors. And now around 90% of schools are rated good or outstanding, but whereas in 2010 it was only 68%. So we've made big improvements in education. And I think that the situation we've got in Liverpool now with this particular school is more down to a bureaucratic error, really, on the part of Liverpool City Council rather than anything in central government.
We will move on because we've got lots more to get through in this programme. Parents waiting for schools in Liverpool's one thing, and many people are still waiting for work to replace dangerous cladding on their flats. That's in the aftermath, of course, of the Grenfell Tower disaster. Government figures suggest nearly 4,000 residential buildings across the country have unsafe cladding, and work to fix those cladding problems has been done at about a fifth of those. But 2 years ago, the government estimated there could actually be more than 8,500 buildings between 11 and 18 metres high. Well, Josh has been living in temporary accommodation since October after the fire service said his block was dangerous. Others haven't been able to sell theirs.
You live with that every day, and you do remember what happens in Grenfell, and it does go through your memory, and you think, what if it's us next time?
And I had wanted to try and sell the property for quite some time, but then Grenfell happened and flats were valued at zero. We were innocent. We didn't know anything about this when we bought these properties.
Well, Giles Grover lives in a block in Castlefield in Manchester that has now been fixed, thankfully, and he hasn't had to pay, but he still campaigns on the issue. Giles, thank you very much. We heard from Josh there. It's an extremely difficult situation for so many people still. Why is this all taking so long, do you think?
Yeah, thank you for having me on the programme. I think the simple point is that it's all very complicated. It's been 7 years since Grenfell. The law changed 2 years ago, but the problem is that buildings just aren't being made safe on the ground at any real pace. There's a lot of different funding schemes. There's different protection in place for different leaseholders, but the problem is that the government will say there's a route to remediation for these buildings. That's in philosophical, theoretical, notional values that there might be, but unfortunately that's different to actually getting the money on the ground, making the building fully safe at pace as quickly as we need so we can just move on with our lives.
And you are still campaigning, even though your situation thankfully has been sorted out. What are people saying to you?
Yeah, so just for clarity, my situation has sort of been sorted out. We've had 3 years of work here. Most of the problems have been fixed, but we've still got the developer to come and fix the remaining problems. So we're in a better position now. But this is the same issue for people across the country, that they'll get funding for some issues. Then they're told you might have to pay for balconies, you might have to pay for internal compartmentation. The problem is that the government, it's done something. It's created a building safety fund, but that's not a building safety fund. We're essentially calling it a building half safety fund because there's still a range of issues that aren't funded. We've shown them how to actually get that funding and make sure the buildings can be made safe in one go. They just need to listen to us, really.
So are you finding that people still are out of money?
Yeah, people have spent money over the last 7 years. They've probably spent different amounts on whether it's Waking Watch, whether it's buildings insurance. As one example, quite typical, my building, I used to pay £300 a year. I'm now paying £1,400 a year for buildings insurance. So we've lost money. We've been told we're not going to get that back. It's the impact to our mental health as well. It's the impact on people's life choices. They're just not able to move on with their lives and they're still trapped, and the government knows it.
Giles, we really thank you for your time this morning. Thank you for joining us.
Sure.
So, Mike, the government, to be fair, has given substantial amounts of money, but there are still huge ongoing concerns here.
Yeah, I think there are, and I think what Giles said is absolutely right. Right at the start of his piece there is that it is very complicated. The Building Safety Act there's funding in place from the Building Safety Fund. The Building Safety Act itself means that there are options available now for leaseholders and local authorities to take freeholders and developers through a process to force them to do the work they need to do to improve the cladding situation. Lots of freeholders and developers will do it because it's the right thing to do, but unfortunately some don't. And when you've got to go through a legal process and take them to a tribunal to get the outcome that needs to be had in most of these situations, unfortunately that does take time because it is a legal process, and no legal process is unfortunately quickly.
I mean, that's going to be cold comfort, I suppose, to people that are living in a flat with dangerous cladding.
It is. I mean, I represent thousands of leaseholders. I'm a leaseholder and myself, I live in an affected building. But, you know, what happened in my experience is, you know, sadly the case in lots of cases here. The building I live in qualified for funding because it was 6 stories. The building next door in the same development, which was 5 stories, didn't. And there was that. There's also an issue here about people being left in limbo. People can't remortgage, people can't move away, people can't sell the properties. And that's a real issue here. And the work that Giles and End Our Cladding Scandal and organisations like Liverpool, Manchester Gladiators are doing is absolutely fantastic. The government have moved, but it's been too little, too late.
Too little, too late. Are people losing faith that the government can actually deliver on the things that they promised to deliver on?
Well, I think the steps that have been taken have shown that the government have taken this issue seriously. There's been funding made available, there's been legislation passed in Parliament so that there's a process to go through to force developers, to force freeholders to take the action that they need to take. But the reality is it is complicated, just as Giles said, as he's experienced, that it is a complicated situation and there is no easy answer to this particular problem, I don't think.
But what there needs to be is looking at the whole issue of leasehold, and there needs to be fundamental leasehold reform. That's
which the government did announce.
They're not going far enough on this. There needs to be fundamental reform of leasehold as a form of land ownership. That's something that's not being considered by government.
OK, all right. Thank you both very much. Now, plans to boost the life sciences industry across the Liverpool City region was set out this week. It's part of an investment zone bringing together government funding, private investment and the university. In a moment, we'll hear from an expert on whether it can really produce the jobs and growth being fan-fed. First, though, here's Mairead Smith.
Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine is one part of the new Life Sciences Investment Zone. High-tech labs using robots and artificial intelligence will be built here to boost their work in fighting disease.
We've shown that companies are beating a path to our door to work with us. What we want to do is really capitalise on that and scale up. The investment zone allows us to do that in two ways. One is actually by providing the infrastructure and improving the infrastructure that we've got, but also with the tax incentives and tax-free zones that we've got. It's really a great package for us being able to get industry to come in, work with us, and potentially export from here as well.
At the minute, machines like these are operated by humans, but being part of this investment zone means that robots and AI will be used to free up people like this lot to do more work on research, to develop new drugs and treatments that will benefit not just the Liverpool City region, but the whole world.
Other major developments include Maghull Health Park, St Helens Manufacturing and Innovation Campus, Earlsfield Park in Knowsley, SciTech in Daresbury and Knowledge Quarter in Liverpool.
What we're going to do is create lots and lots of really good jobs and cement our position at the forefront of the innovation race so that worldwide companies will decide to come here first and foremost.
It's hoped today's announcement of £800 million worth of investment over the next decade will help the city retain talent and improve the health of those living here.
Well, that was the case for the investment zone. The Centre for Cities think tank has done some research on similar schemes. Ryan Mills asked how transformative it might be.
I think it's a good thing that the Liverpool City region has one, but we should be careful about how transformative we think these things are going to be. But the reality is that when we've done these types of policies in the past, enterprise zones are the most recent examples of them, the actual jobs created are way lower than what is forecast. And actually those types of jobs tend to be in lower skilled type activities too. So we always have to be quite sceptical about the number of jobs that are proclaimed will be created and not let them distract from some of the more fundamental reasons why there aren't as many high-paid jobs in the Liverpool City region as what we would actually like.
So what are those reasons and what part could this play in addressing them?
So the key thing for Liverpool City region is to make it attractive to high-skilled businesses to come and invest. Now, the first thing within that is, have you got the skills available for those businesses to come in? And I don't think Liverpool does quite so well as what other parts of the country do, particularly the Greater South East. And the second one is around city centre redevelopment. Is it, particularly within the city centre, is there the required commercial space available to attract these types of companies in? Third one then is local transport within that, which the Mayor has taken a number of steps towards, particularly with the movement towards bus franchising too. But it's very much the two elements of skills and city centre development. Are those two things in place? And so only then when we crack those fundamental issues will we then see an increase in the number of high-skilled, high-paid jobs coming into the Liverpool City region.
So really he sounds quite underwhelmed by the whole idea of these investment zones. Mike, are you quite surprised by that?
Well, yeah, really, because I think the investment zones are a good idea, frankly. I think it runs for a 10-year period. It's projected to bring in about £800 million of public and private investment. We've just seen AstraZeneca have announced that they're putting another £450 million into their site in South Liverpool. So I think it has a lot of opportunity. Well, it provides a lot of opportunity for growth and for generating high-paid, high-skilled jobs in the area. I take the point about saying that Liverpool and any region, to be honest with you, needs to take responsibility for its own destiny. So I think some of the decisions that have been made haven't really helped us with investment. And by way of example, Liverpool Airport needs to expand. It's got a business plan to expand, but there seems to be some resistance from Liverpool City Council about allowing them to expand. And I think that locally would have a massive impact on generating growth and jobs in the area.
I might come back to that in a sec, but let me just pick up on one point again that Paul made, which was he says that Liverpool City region doesn't have the skills to attract big investment.
Well, I think skills have got to be part of this conversation. I think if you look at the funding that's coming into Liverpool, there's a certain amount of that that's been allocated around skills, and it is important that we do that. It's important that we work with schools, we work with universities, we work with colleges. The FE sector is absolutely crucial to this, to get the right skills for residents to take advantage of this. But I'd completely agree with Mike. This is a huge opportunity, over 21 separate projects right across the city region with the potential to bring in 8,000 new jobs.
But will the jobs be created? Because, again, he said that, and the Institute for Government actually says that the policy has been redesigned in a positive way, but actually, even if they're successful, it's not going to be transformative.
I disagree with that. I completely disagree. I think if you've got major companies like AstraZeneca putting...
The evidence is there, though, that they're not creating the amount of jobs that they are
They're
expected
putting huge
to.
sums of money into the area, and that to me is a sign that a huge multinational company has taken a decision to put large sums of money into the area because they see the opportunities for growth. They see that the local population have the skills needed to be able to deliver the employment and jobs and the requirements of a major employer like AstraZeneca.
OK, well, let's move on very slightly to levelling up, because the Public Accounts Committee this week said that only 10% of promised funds from levelling up were actually spent and were making a difference on the ground. Is this something that you agree with, Nick?
I would agree with it. I think the facts speak for themselves. I think levelling up's been a slogan, but it's not really delivered on the ground. And I think you look at life sciences and some of the work that's gone on, largely through the combined Liverpool City Region Combined Authority and the devolution agenda, that has delivered. That's the way we deliver. It's not through top-down, through slogans and through central government.
The bidding process is something that a lot of people have brought up, that this is so arduous and it's expensive, and that actually you're going cap in hand to the government with a begging bowl saying, give us some money.
Well, I don't think that's right at all. I think the funding's made available to put the business case together when a bid is delivered.
How much has Sefton received?
Well, in Southport, there's nearly £40 million for the new theatre and convention centre in Southport. I think in the last round of funding, another £20 million was made available.
Not huge amounts, though.
Well, they're isolated projects. If you look at the other funds that have been made available from the reallocation of HS2 money recently, so we've got £12 billion has been promised to improve connectivity between Liverpool and Manchester in terms of rail infrastructure. The north of England's getting £19.8 billion from the reallocation of that money as well. They're massive sums of money, massive sums of investment that are going to be going into our region, which is going to benefit our region in the long run. So I don't think it's fair to say that it's just a slogan, that it doesn't mean anything. There are projects on the ground now which are starting to be built.
But it's money that's been, this was supposed to be money to replace European funding that came into, you look at Liverpool City Region, Merseyside had Objective 1 funding. What came in through levelling up has been, it was so much smaller than what we got through European funding. It hasn't been a replacement. It hasn't been spent on the ground. It's been a slogan and it's not delivered for people.
What I would say to that is that I disagree with it for the points I've made previously about the funding that's coming in, but I also think that we need to make decisions better locally as well. So the point I made about Liverpool Airport earlier, we can't just rely on central government in Westminster to make decisions for us and give us funding for various projects.
OK, so the councils aren't actually spending it properly.
Well, we've got decisions to make locally, so they're effectively with Liverpool Airport, they're being hampered from expanding, hampered from creating more jobs, generating more wealth for the area because they're not being allowed to expand, and that's a key asset for the area.
Very quickly.
Simply isn't the case. In the local plan, it deals with the airport and the council supports Liverpool Airport, and we want to see a vibrant airport. We want to see that go from strength to strength.
OK, well, there was a second report out today that and I know Blackpool isn't the area for either of you, but we're talking about a north-south divide here, that Blackpool has the highest rate of preventable deaths from things like alcohol, drug abuse and suicide. They're dubbed deaths of despair. Is this down to, it sounds quite crude to say it, but is this life choices or is this inequality? Is this a north-south divide, Nick?
I think it is around inequalities. And I think, look, I'm not going to make political points about this because I think it's too important. But I think if you look at some of the opportunities we've got with health and life sciences, it's about linking that into this agenda. There is a real opportunity here around improving health outcomes in places like Liverpool, in places like Blackpool, through linking it into what we're doing with health and life sciences. That's why we're doing this, as well as the jobs, as well as the growth, to get changes in people's lives.
I mean, the government's given 90
90
million to help regeneration and housing in Blackpool. That's a great start.
It is a good start, and I'm not as familiar with what's happening in Blackpool as I am in Liverpool. We had this debate around public health in Liverpool, and Liverpool faces, lots of places will face the same challenges. There's an opportunity here.
It does highlight, though, this north-south divide is still there.
There were clearly some issues that the reports identified, but what I would say is that in the budget, the Chancellor announced £6 billion of extra funding for the NHS. Nationwide, we've had over 160 new diagnostic centres. Some of them have been opened in the North West as well. All these things are help addressing those particular issues. But the big thing that, for me, and that any health report always shows, is that people's economic situation has a massive impact on their health outcomes.
All right. Thank you both very much. Yes, thank you to Mike Prendergast and Nick Small. Join us again at the same time next week. Bye-bye.
Welcome to breakfast.
Thanks for joining us.
Hello. You're going to have a great time.
Remember, Kev, you aren't getting any younger.
Sun up, I think, in about 10 minutes' time.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. You've been up there and looked down at us here. Right, let's go live to Westminster.
Today is going to be much colder than of late.
We do want to hear your stories.
Oh, he does smell good, actually. Arnold Schwarzenegger, thank you very much.
Start your day the BBC Breakfast way on BBC One and iPlayer.
Barriers breaking, boundaries taken, accelerating.
6 Nations domination.
Every tackle reverberating, every try breathtaking.
Power, power, power.
Feel every moment of the Women's 6 Nations, every minute live. Starts next Saturday at 2:15 on BBC Two and iPlayer.
It's St Patrick's Day, so join us later for a special celebration of hymns and stories in honour of Ireland's patron saint.
That's Claire McCollum and those following in the footsteps of St Patrick, coming up in our first on BBC One Sunday Morning Live with Sean and Holly.
Hello and welcome to the show that puts the heart and soul into Sundays, bringing faith and ethics to the discussions that matter most.
Coming up today on Sunday Morning Live, as it's revealed that some prisoners could be released early to relieve overcrowding in jails, we're asking, should we send fewer people to prison?
And a report this week revealed that more than a fifth of working-age adults are not actively looking for work. We'll be discussing whether factors like the pandemic and the benefit system have made some Britons work shy.